Thank you, Deputy Chair, and it's with mixed feelings that I rise to stand again this year to speak on the Closing the Gap statement that has been presented to the Australian Parliament. Last week, last Thursday, of course, we had a very powerful presentation from the Social Justice Commissioner, June Oscar, which in her capacity as one of the co-conveners of the Close the Gap Committee, presented to the Parliament, well, those that were in attendance at the breakfast and presentation meeting, some of the very profound concerns that First Nation peoples have in Australia with regards to the progress, or indeed, probably more accurately, the lack of progress that is being made on a number of fronts. And it was regretful that this was not a platform for politicians to speak at. That was made very, very clear. It was an opportunity for Indigenous people to stand and really speak freely to all of us who were able to be present there. I know the Prime Minister had some other commitments and had to leave early, and that was a shame. But there were a good number of us that remained to really try to just to listen. And indeed, that was the message, that was the profound message that came from that specific event. As I said, that was shaped by Aboriginal people. The message very clearly back to politicians was, you know, you need to sit down, be quiet, listen to what we have to say, reflect on this, and to be serious about a genuine partnership with First Nation peoples about a pathway going forward and mechanisms to redress what can only be described as a grossly inadequate response to date to the challenge of closing the gap. And I think that is really, that was the profound message I took home. Closing the gap on Indigenous health, education and wellbeing in general must start with a profound commitment to close the gap, but also be founded on a respectful and genuine partnership with First Nation peoples. So I guess I'd like to turn now to the Close the Gap statement that has been presented. There have, as other speakers before me have acknowledged, there have been a few wins in the sense of some gains in some of those targeted areas. So we are on track, as others have mentioned, towards halving the gap in child mortality. By 2016, the most recent data showed that that gap had shrunk by 32%. Excellent outcome. Enrolments up by the goal, of getting a 95% enrolment of Indigenous 4-year-olds in early childhood education by 2025 is also on track. That rate is now at 91%. And halving the gap in Year 12 attainment by 2020 is on track. So that gap has shrunk to 23.8%. None of those gaps, despite making progress, means that we should rest on our laurels, of course. We should not be satisfied until there is complete equity in all of these goals. I guess the very disturbing part of the Close the Gap report is to see the consistent failure that we have had on the remaining targets. And those are, of course, really critical targets around literacy and numeracy, closing the gap on employment, which we have, we've seen Indigenous unemployment rise. We are not closing the gap there. That is going in the exactly opposite direction that we would want. We've also seen, regretfully, a slide back on the life expectancy scale. So We had an ambition of closing that gap of life expectancy by 2031, but we are clearly going in the wrong direction on that one. And indeed, Indigenous students still have 10 percentage points behind on the school attendance rates in 2018, despite some inroads there. So, I think it is worth reflecting on what programs are in place now around those and why they are failing. And I would put it to this Parliament that the fundamental reason of those failures are that they are not community-owned programs. They are not done in genuine partnership with the Indigenous communities. And I don't know how many times it takes us to get to understand. I mean, I heard the Prime Minister standing up in Parliament the other day repeating on a number of occasions, we are going to, it's not, doing things to Aboriginal people, it's doing things with Aboriginal people. The only way to make that something more than cheap political talk is to start walking action now. You cannot keep repeating that phrase and think it's going to somehow come true when your actions actually defy what you are saying in Parliament. As I said, that only way that we can close the gap on all of these important targets is a very deep and respectful commitment to do so, but a genuine partnership with Aboriginal people. And I'm sorry, but this government's inability to work consistently in a genuine partnership with First Nation peoples is deeply problematic. It is deeply problematic. When you do not have that partnership basis, when these programs are not owned by the communities in which you seek to operate them, when they are not systemically targeted programs delivered in coordinated ways, there is a problem, because all of the evidence tells us that you need each of those ingredients to be in operation in order to have a successful program. We know, for example, health issues cannot be adequately tackled without also addressing a whole range of other very key social and cultural determinants. So again, when this government decides to backflip on a commitment around a national partnership on remote housing agreement, that has profound ramifications for all of these targets that we're trying to achieve here. How on earth do we provide safe housing for children in communities growing up when they are living in, an average of, 17 to 23 people living in any given home in a community? How do we expect kids to be able to, do their learning at school and come home? The concept that there would be some quiet space to retreat to at home in order to do some homework is just ludicrous, I think the government's inability to make those connections between the programs that must be, as I said, community-owned, clearly sort of targeted and coordinated carefully, and the outcomes that they desire is very, very problematic. So the Leader of the Opposition, Bill Shorten, made very clear in his comments around closing the gap just in Parliament on Monday that whilst we are very keen to work with the government to deliver better outcomes, this bipartisanship cannot be used as an alibi for inaction in this government. And I say, I join with the Leader of the Opposition to say that we wish to work with you to deliver better outcomes, but we are not going to sit by and wait for you guys to catch up. This is not, we don't have time for that. So I absolutely applaud Labor's initiatives in terms of taking seriously the statement from the heart that was given at Uluru and those very real issues that were raised there before us. I am absolutely supportive of the idea to add some additional targets around incarceration and out-of-home care into the list. I think the compensation packages into the stolen generations in Commonwealth jurisdictions critical. Money into the Healing Foundation.
The member's time
All
has
of these
expired.
are necessary.
I think